Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Nicole from the Institute of Banking and Finance, and I'm delighted that you're able to join us this afternoon for the IBF Masterclass jointly organized with Momenta on navigating a positive leadership culture at work. We're glad to have with us today Derek Ma, who is a managing partner, Leadership Solutions at Momenta. Before I get him to share his insights, for those who may be unfamiliar with IBF, allow me to do a very brief intro on the resources we have to help professionals in the financial industry. IBF was established by the MES in 1974 as a training provider to provide functional training for the financial industry. Since then, our role has evolved into one of standard setting for financial services sector skills and competencies. In August 2018, our mandate was expanded to cover career advisory and job matching functions for the financial services sector. We were also appointed as a jobs development partner for the financial services sector by the Jobs Development Council and now oversee both skills and jobs development in the financial industry in Singapore. Here's a quick look at our services and how we support the industry across training, recruitment, and workforce transformation. You can find out more about our services and connect with us on any of these areas via our website. The enhanced course fee subsidies, which are part of MES's support package to encourage companies to send their employees for training and upskilling, will continue to be in place till the end of the year. Training course subsidies under IBF STS programs will now be at 70% for trainees below the age of 40, while remaining at 90% for those above the age of 40. Training course subsidies under IBF FTS programs will be at 50% for trainees under the age of 40, while still remaining at 90% for those above the age of 40. You can find these new details on the Enhanced Training Support page on the IBF website. You can also find a list of eligible training programs on the IBF Program Finder on our website. In addition, IBF will also be supplementing the commercial training available with free webinars like this during this period to support the needs of the industry. All these are complimentary and are coded with CPD hours. And that concludes my short intro. I'll now hand the time over to Derek, who will take you through today's masterclass. Over to you.
Thank you, Nicole. It is an honor to be able to be with you all here. Let me get my screen ready and let's get started. So I am Derek Ma, and my colleague here, Denise Hosh, will be looking at the questions in the chat. But I am the managing partner of Singapore, as Nicole has said. I wanted to show you that I have a lot of experience for coaching because that's going to be relevant for later. I also do a lot of training for a management consulting company called A.T. Kearney, now known as Kearney. And I'm also one of their coaches. I do a number of trainings here, but I also oversee all of Ken Blanchard Singapore. So if you've done anything, especially our flagship SL2 program, you'll be very familiar with today. Today will actually be an overview of SL2. So if you have done it, it'll be a great reminder if you've done SL2. So there's my LinkedIn, and I spent a lot of money on that headshot. So research shows that if you spend money on a picture, you should show it to a lot of people. So that's my headshot. I wanted to show you that I can smile because this is a positive leadership culture talk. So the goal here at the end of this conversation is that you would have a more positive ability to lead. But firstly, let me ask you all a question. Do you know what type of leadership your people need? And are you sure you are providing it? There's no need to answer it. I just want you to reflect. Do you know what type of leadership your people need? And are you sure you're providing it? If you want to create a positive leadership culture, you have to know what your people need. And then you have to make sure you're giving it. Now, again, I'm not going to ask anyone for confession time, but we will take a look at this more. But first, let's talk about our worst leader. Let's think of our worst leader, and I'm going to ask you to type it into the chat. What did they do? What did he or she or they, what did they do? And how did you react? Drop it in the chat. And as you're thinking about that, I'll share the example of my worst leader. I had a situation once where my leader said, hey, I love direct feedback. So give me direct feedback. I want it all the time. And so then I continued to give my leader, my manager, direct feedback. And he got so angry at me and so defensive. And he yelled at me, and it culminated in this one meeting. And we're in front of my peers. He said, "You're just trying to take my job." And if he asked me, I would have said, "I would never want to do your job." But you asked me for direct feedback. So I was giving you direct feedback. And it was such a ridiculous situation. And then I just got to a place where I didn't stay in that organization very long. It made me feel like he didn't respect me. And he just felt inconsistent because he asked me for feedback. And when I gave him feedback, he was like, no. So there's some great things here in the chat. Clueless, no direction, all over the place. They do not practice good consideration for other members. They gossip about their peers, double standards. Don't let staff go home on time. Worst leaders do nothing. Micromanage with big egos that blame team for failure. Man, those are tough. Those are tough. Those are tough. Good Lord. Top-down leader who thinks only he or she can be right and never do wrong. Absolutely. These are terrible. I'm so sorry for some of the leaders that you guys have had. Now, that's the worst leader. Let's shift gears and let's talk about the best leader. Think of your best leader, and hopefully you all have something good. What did the best leader in your history, in your life, do? Let me give you an example. Focus on behaviors and how did they make you react? So I had a leader once who would pull me aside and he would say, "What else do you need from me?" And then he would sit there and listen, and he would keep eye contact. And I would say, "Well, I really need this resource, or I need you more time. I need you to authorize this for me." And then he would do it. And that made me feel like this boss really cared for me and really wanted me to do the things that I set out to do. It really motivated me. So let's hear some of it here. Let's see. Open-minded and walk the talk. How important is it for our leaders to not just talk about stuff, but actually back it up with action? I totally agree with that. Prepare and support the next chapter in life. Oh, that's really good. Sharing that a leader will help them not only for this current job, but in future jobs to come. I love this. They empowered me and to make my own decisions for my team while supporting when possible. It's so awesome to feel like your boss listens and empowers. I mean, it seems like it's where positive vibes with direction and vision. Positive vibes. You want a boss where you go to, and it's like a good conversation, right? Not a stressful or down one. Yeah, I like this. Be approachable and encourage, lead by example. When bosses and leaders are not approachable, you just end up thinking, I don't even want to talk to them. Now, some of you might be thinking, oh, that'd be great if my team members talk to me less. But awesome. Servant leader, willing to take decisions in the situation. These are all so good. Now, how about I turn this on you? When I run our programs, especially for SL2, we have something called the dinner table conversations. What do you think your team members are saying at dinner about you? Would they be describing you in a positive way, or would they be describing you in a not so positive way? And this is what I really push when I talk to and when I coach executives and leaders. How do you know you're being a good leader? And how do you know you're really impacting them in the best way possible? Well, you got to have good conversations. You got to have good conversations. And the reason why you need good conversations is because you really don't know what people want. Sometimes you do, or you may think that you do. But let me give an example. We here at Ken Blanchard, we've been in the leadership space for over 50 years, and we function in 35 different countries, 15 different languages. We are doing leadership development and training, and we do a lot of research. And what we found is when we asked individual contributors, employees, non-leaders, right, non-managers, when we asked them what they want from work, this is the list they came up with. Now, this research is a little bit dated. It's over 5 years, so it's before COVID, and it does lean a little bit heavy towards North America. But I kind of feel like even in the financial sector in Singapore or in the region, it would be similar. This is very interesting. It says here, number one, they want interesting work. Number two, they want appreciation of the work that they have done. And number three, they want the feeling that they're being in on things, which means they want to be informed. They want to be talked to, communicated to, rather than just told all the time what to do. Now, those are team members, individual contributors. When managers were asked, and this is where it gets really interesting, is that the top thing that managers wanted, or leaders, they wanted good wages. They wanted job security. Number three they wanted was promotion and growth. They wanted advancement opportunities. So look at this. Employees wanted interesting work, appreciation, and communication. Managers wanted good wages, job security, and advancement opportunities. But look at the disconnect. The number two on the employee list of what they want is number 8 on the managers. Number 3 is number 10. So all this to say is, many times we need to communicate with our people to understand how they're doing and what do they need. Now, for some of you, you might already be thinking, well, why do I don't need to do that. I don't have time for that. Well, I know this is a CPD complimentary hour, but if you really want to make a positive leadership culture, you got to start changing some of the conversations that you have to know what your employees need and want. Great leaders are not mind readers. If you want a positive leadership culture at work, you have to talk about it. And it means many things here. Talk about their goals, talk about how they're doing, talk about what's motivating them, talk about their struggles, talk about what they need and what they're lacking. If you want a positive leadership culture at work, you've got to talk and you've got to have high quality conversations. Now, some of you know exactly what I'm talking about, and some of you are like, I don't know how to do that. Well, today, as this is a masterclass, I'm going to give you an overview of our framework for leadership, and all of it is all about having great conversations. So even by the end of this hour with me, you will hopefully have a framework and a few skills, a few understandings on how to do it. And if you want to do even more, you can sign up for one of our programs at the end of the year. And that's why we introduced to you today the SL2 model. Some of you have done SL2, I'm pretty sure, but that will be, again, this will be a review for you. But for those of you who are seeing this for the first time, Ken Blanchard's SL2 framework is the most widely taught leadership model in the world. 2/3 of all Fortune 500 companies use it. Over 5 million leaders trained. And like I said earlier, 35 countries, 15 different languages. And I think in a few weeks, we'll be starting our 16th language, which is in Cantonese, that Momenta is doing in Hong Kong. So super exciting stuff. All that to say is, this is something that's been tried and true, has been evolved over time. And when it's applied, it will really help your communication with your team members. So this SL2 framework, this leadership framework, really is a foundation for a lot of our programs that we offer under Ken Blanchard companies. Ken Blanchard himself wrote this book that really talks about how this framework works in a very easy to read leadership fable type style. It's called The New 1 Minute Manager. You can buy that on Kindle or Kinokuniya for very affordable. And for all of you here, we offer SL2 and it's the IBF certified program. We offer both a 2-day and a 1-day. And so if anything that you hear today is something that you're interested in for team leaders, or if you are a decision maker, you must know we are certified. And then we also are certified for self-leadership, which is specifically directed at individual contributors. And so what we want you to know is that IBF funding will be here for both of these and will continue into the new year. But what's important that everyone should know is that IBF funding does change significantly starting in 2023. So we have had some organizations call us in the last few weeks saying, oh my gosh, funding is changing. Can we do a program? And the answer is yes, we can do an in-house program to take advantage of the last few months of IBF funding. However, there are a bunch of other things that we do provide. That is the framework here on the top left that you see on your screen is for team leadership using the SL2 model. Over here is legendary service. And in the bottom left here is a coaching essentials. And there are many more programs that we provide. But today you're going to really know the foundation, which is this SL2 framework. So let's get into it. What you're going to learn today is our overarching and foundational concept, which are 3 skills in the SL2 framework. The first is goal setting. Goal setting in and of itself is something that everyone does in organizations and in leadership worldwide, obviously. However, Ken Blanchard companies in SL2, we have developed a framework and a strategy for goal setting that could potentially really help, especially if you're thinking about building something positive. If you want to build a positive, and I'm not saying it's not productive, but if we're focusing on that word positive, I'm presenting to you a new way how to do goals. The second skill that we're going to look at today is called diagnosing. This is, according to how SL2 defines it, it is a collaborative conversation assessing an individual's competence and commitment. Those are 2 key words we're going to go into a lot: competence and commitment on a specific goal or task. Once they know the developmental level, or they're diagnosed to be what development level they are at for the specific goal or task, then we match what they need in terms of a leadership style. Basically, it's like this. Let's set a really good goal to get something done. Let's figure out what this person's ability is and their motivation to do this goal or task. And then let's give them the leadership that they need in order to get it done. Now, in a nutshell, this is what it's all about. But zooming out, if we all had bosses that could go to us and say, let's make a really great goal. Let's find out how good you are at and what you need from me. And then your boss responds with the exact stuff that you need, whether it's support or whether it's resources or direction. Wouldn't that be a great situation? And the hope is, yes, it will be great. So let's go into the first skill, which is goal setting. Now, you might have heard the SMART acronym for goals. And actually, Ken Blanchard in SL2 does use the SMART goal, but today I'm going to show you just a little bit of a tweak on the SMART. The SL2 SMART is a little bit different. The first, obviously, is the same and consistent with the others, and it's specific. A goal should be specific. What exactly is a goal, or is the goal or task? Now, I actually do this a lot in coaching and executives especially. You are a leader. You have been promoted. If you're on this call and you're a manager of people or a team leader, you're successful at what you do. And now your job as a leader is not just to hit your own numbers, but you have to lead other people. How good are you at describing what a great job looks like? The more that executives and leaders spend time being able to articulate what a good job looks like, not just a deliverable, but what does a great job look like? Once executives can do that more clearly with their people, they find that their team members, their direct reports, will be able to execute more. A lot of leaders, and I'm telling you this anecdotally from my coaching, a lot of leaders do not know how to describe what a good job looks like. They only know how to describe the KPI at the end. The more that you can articulate what a great job looks like to your people, the more that they understand, and the more that they'll be clear about your expectations. Do you want to know what the biggest hindrance of having a positive work culture is? Unmet, unspoken expectations. Unmet and unspoken expectations really derail the vibe of any team. So be specific. Be able to share what a really good job looks like. Now, the T for SL2, goal setting, is a little bit different. Normally, you would see it elsewhere called time bound, but this is trackable. This is trackable. What does this mean? Well, are there ways for this goal to be tracked? How do we know that we're on the way towards success? What are the measurables? See, that with KPIs, it's a lagging indicator. KPI is you get to the end and you've done it many times. But have you discussed with your team, what does it look like for them to be 50% there? Or when are we going to check? If it's end of year, what about half year? Now, sometimes this is baked into the rhythm of your organization or your team, but sometimes it's not. And you'll have a colleague or a coworker or direct report, and they don't know whether they're on the right track. So we really in SL2 want to get leaders to be specific about what a great job looks like, and then talk about, well, how do we measure success before we end at that final number? So specific and trackable is going to be a little bit different from what you've seen elsewhere if you know what SMART goals are. Now, the A and the R is going to be the same as what you've seen. Is it relevant? Is it relevant to the organization? Is it relevant to our team? Is it relevant to our business unit? Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. Sometimes you might need to sit down with someone and say, hey, what you're targeting and what you're goaling after, it's not really relevant. So let's change that. Or is it attainable? Some people like to go for this thing called shoot for the moon, give them an impossible goal, and they'll be happy with whatever goes. But research has found that when you do that, it actually is demotivating to people. So you want to set a goal that is attainable. Now, this last one might be very different for some of you. And the M for SL2 goaling is motivating. And you can find out their motivation by saying, hey, are you excited or interested in this goal? Now, if you are any type of team leader in this call, you would have set goals for someone. And why would they ask you? I mean, why would they share if they're motivated or not? You're thinking, hold on, wait a second. You get commission, you get a salary, you have a job, you have all this stuff. Shouldn't you already be motivated? Shouldn't they already want to do this job? I'll tell you quite honestly, as a coach, having a conversation with your team members about whether they actually are excited or interested in this goal might really change your leadership. You might be surprised. They might say to you, yeah, super excited, but they might also say to you, not excited at all. And that's supposed to lead to a great conversation. Well, do we need to look into that? Do we need to resource you more? Do we need to train you? Or do we need to just goal something else? And what we have found specifically, and if any of you lead younger generation, like Gen Zs especially, we'll find that this conversation of, am I motivated, is actually much more necessary because they want to know that they're doing something with a purpose, and they want to, how should I say this? They want to feel like they're doing something important. Please don't yell at me. I am not Gen Z, but I'm just sharing with you what we have seen in the younger generations now coming up into the workforce. If you have the ability and the scope to re-goal after that motivating conversation, and if you do change the goals based on someone's motivations within reason, it will really show that you care and that you're listening, and that you will definitely create a positive work culture, leadership culture. So I just want to encourage you. This is going to be different for some people here, and I want to encourage you to try it. Try this. And if you're going to do it, writing it down. So how we teach people, and again, if you work in if you come to any of our leadership trainings, we actually do it STRAM. We start with specific and with trackable. Usually when you're writing a goal, you start with specific and trackable. Those are the most important. When you're talking about a goal with your individual team member, you just talk about the R and the A, and you have the M as the last part of the conversation. The motivating should be the final part of the conversation. So we use the acronym STRAM: specific, trackable, then relevant and attainable, and finally motivating. Now, some of you, that's going to be, the thing you take away. Should I ask my team members if they're motivated? And if they're not, let's get the conversation on that. Go ahead and do it, please. Because if you can change anything in terms of the goaling, it will really help your people. If you ask them, are you motivated? And they say no, and you say, well, too bad, you got to do it. Don't even bring it up. You'll lose respect, and it'll just be more. But if you ask if they're motivated, and then they say nope, and then you have the scope to change it, it will change how it is. Now, this is a controversial statement I'm going to say to you. And we bring this up in the self-leadership course, is a person who doesn't set a goal is used by someone who does. A person who doesn't set a goal is used by someone who does. We spend some time on this statement for self-leadership because we want individual contributors and team members to take initiatives to set their own good goals or to communicate with their leaders so that they get their voice heard and that increases their buy-in, which increases their motivation. Essentially, if people aren't setting goals for themselves, someone else is going to set the goal for them. Or if they don't push back on goals, which they know they don't want to do or can achieve, then they'll never achieve what they really truly can in terms of potential. So let's get good goals for our people. And if you are a individual contributor here and you don't have a team, it's time for you to take a look at that framework and maybe you can set better goals for yourself. Now, moving on. That was goal setting. Diagnosing. Now, this is going to be the main chunk of our talk here, because with diagnosing, it's so important for you to understand where you're at in a task or a goal. And it's even more important when you are a leader, because if you're assigning goals and tasks to a person and they are absolutely incapable of doing it and you expect them to, or worse, you just think the world of them and they can handle it, but they can't, there's misalignment. And this is what we're trying to address here. You are collaboratively assessing. So it's not just you telling them, it's together we decide. Together we decide what your individual's competence and commitment is on a specific goal or task. Competence and commitment. Think of it like two different levers. There's competence and commitment. How do we define competence? Competence is their proven ability to execute the goal or task. Proven ability with proof, not potential. When we talk about the competence, we talk about what has that person done? What has been their deliverables? Competence is what can be proven, not potential. Commitment, on the other hand, is their confidence and their motivation. Motivation is defined with SL2 with us is whether they want to do the job or not, whether they want to do the task or goal. And confidence is whether they feel like they can do the job or not. Two different things. Motivation is whether they want to. Confidence is whether they feel like they can or not. So if you think of these two levers, you can have competence high or low, and you can have commitment high or low. You can have four different ways. It's either opposites, both up, both down. And that is the concept when we're working with diagnosing. We're going to go into this in a little bit more detail, but the model of SL2 goes from right to left, goes from red to green. The D stands for developmental level. Developmental level 1, D1, D2, and D3. Okay, let's go into this in more detail. Oh, before we do, it's very important. We don't label a person D1, D2, D3. We are only talking, when we talk about SL2 and leadership framework, we're talking about, are they doing it at a specific task or goal? Because someone can be really good at something, super high committed, super high competence at something, but they can be absolutely terrible at something else. They could be D2 at something else. So remember, this is about task or goal. This is going to be important when you talk to someone, because what happens is negative leadership work environments is that somebody might have missed the target, or they're not doing that well in some certain things, but they could be doing great in other things. But what we do is that we see that whole person as not very good. And we and Ken Blanchard try to stop people doing that. Don't put people in a box. Put their ability in their task or goal in the box and then move them out of that box. But don't put a person, don't label people. So I'm going to go over this, what these D1, D2, D3, D4 profiles look like, because I want you at the end of this call to be able to just identify a little bit and to just be able to understand what's my response here, okay? So D1 is what? D1 is a low competence, but super high commitment. Think of someone who is a fresh grad, no work experience, and they come in and they are super excited, but they have no or maybe zero experience. So this person here in this picture, super smiley, super eager, but has no experience. Think fresh grad, they're super excited, right? But they just don't know what to do. But because they're a new hire, because they're a fresh grad, they're like, come on, let's go. I'm ready. That's your enthusiastic beginner. Now, let's say for this person, they get a good leader who then shows them how to do their job, right? They need training. They need someone to show them what to do. They need someone to, set some good goals for them and tell them how to do the job. Let's say this person starts getting more experience. They start learning how to do the job, and then it gets tough for them. Why? Because now they figured out, whoa, this is harder than I thought it was. Then their competence goes up a little bit, but their enthusiasm and their motivation just drops. And that's when you get to D2. And that's called a disillusioned learner or the discouraged learner. That's when you have your competence low and your commitment is low. Your competence is low because you didn't really learn that many skills, but then also you're so discouraged that you're stuck. We also call this the quit zone. Why? Because if you're not very good at your job and or your task or goal, and you don't really want to do it, you have a choice. You either get better at it or you leave. That's why we call this the quit zone sometimes. Now, let's say this person or anyone in a D2 situation for a task or goal, let's say they get more training. Or let's say the leader comes in and says, oh my gosh, I really got to help you. Let me get you out of this unstuck place. Maybe a change in leadership, maybe a change in resources, maybe a change in team. Something happens where this person gains in their competence. They get better at skill sets. They get better at executing, and then they start to deliver. They may not be doing it to the best of their ability. They may not be super confident in it, but they are contributing. And so we call people at D3 capable but cautious contributors. Now, it's important to note that people who are D3 at a specific task or goal, they're executing, they're delivering. They're not masters at it. They're not super confident, but they are delivering. So the difference between D2 and D3 is that D2, they're not able to meet their targets, but at D3, they are. Someone who's at D3, if they continue to kick butt and they're really executing and they're really growing, and they do it so well that their competence gets super high. They're executing, but more than just executing, they're doing it better than you. They're exceeding by far targets, or they're super capable. You don't even need to tell them what to do anymore. And then they're super motivated. You don't need to motivate them. They're going off on their own. Maybe they're industry leader. That's great. And then those become self-reliant achievers. Remember, these are specific tasks or goals. People can be D1, D4, D3, D2 at different things. So it's not a person, it's for task or goal. Now, I just want to pause here for a second and take it all in. When it comes to building a positive work culture, we're basically saying, listen, with every task or goal, there's going to be roughly 4 different levels which somebody is at. So we clarify what are the differentiations between these 4 levels. And the point is, when you know what this is, you know what they need, and you can address their needs and be a much better leader, leading to a positive work culture. Positive work and leadership culture. Let's go into this a little bit more detail now. I'm giving you more detail. This is going to be way too much for you, but this is a masterclass, so I want to be able to give it to you if you want to reflect more on it. But this is going to be an overview because we dive into this a lot more when it comes to the actual workshop. But D1, enthusiastic beginner, super low competence, but really highly committed, right? Super high. Think new, fresh grad. No skill set, but they want to learn. They don't know what they don't know. They're eager. They're enthusiastic. They want to be there. Just tell them what to do because they have no idea what to do. Right? So the next level is D2. Let's say this person at D1 gets support, gets direction, and then they know, okay, now I know what to do, but then they start doing it and oh no, they hit a wall. It's tough. Now they know what they don't know and they get stuck. They might be overwhelmed because it's just too much. They might be confused because it's just there's just all this information, or it's just too much for them. And so they become disillusioned or discouraged, and then they get into this potential quit zone. Again, let's say they push through and they decide not to quit, but to keep going at it. And then they get to this place where they all of a sudden are meeting targets and they are being productive and they're contributing, right? But even though their competence is moderate to high and they're delivering, their commitment, maybe their confidence, maybe their motivation is not at the highest. But it's important to note people at D3, they are contributing. Then you have D4, competent, recognized by others as expert, self-reliant achiever. Autonomous, self-assured, they're going for it. Now, again, that's an overview, but let me, the best way that I can explain this and that we explain it is through telling a story. And as I'm telling this story, I want you all to think, what are you super at? What are you super at? What do you think that you are D4 at? It could be something at work. It could be something at home. It could be personal life. It could be a musical instrument. It could be sports, whatever it is. So let me tell you the story of me. So I'm going to use executive coaching. It's not very, fun, but it's a very clear story I can take you on. So I know that I'm at D4 for executive coaching. Why? Well, because in the last few years, I've been able to have a lot of clients, a lot of success. I've been recognized by people in the industry, both personally, they would come to me for advice and mentoring, to train them and develop them as a coach. But I've also been certified by the International Coach Federation. And also I was able to sit on the ICF, the International Coach Federation board in Hong Kong. But more importantly, I don't need anyone to tell me how to coach. I know how to do it. And I'm also training others. So let me pause there. This is how I know I'm at D4, and I'll clarify for you. One is I have success. There's proof in terms of paying clients and there's revenue on a consistent basis. 2 is that I have certifications, so I have qualifications. 3 is that I've been recognized in the industry by other people, so I can sit on the board and stuff. 4 is that I'm super confident that I can do it, and I don't need anyone to tell me how to do it. So just think in your life, what are you D4 at? Some people play piano excellently. Some people can cook. Some people are excellent at, acquiring high net worth clients to invest in certain products. Some of you know how to get people to invest in incredible insurance products. How do you know that you are D4 and what are the defining things? And you're doing this for yourself, because when you do this for yourself, you are then able to see it in others. So let me tell you more about the story to illustrate it more. Yes, that's where I'm at now as in terms of my coaching abilities, but it wasn't always like that. Oh, this is the emoji, because emojis help everything. So this is my thing. It's a strong arm and I'm confident, and that's where I'm at now if I have to do an emoji to represent D4. D1 though. So in my story for coaching, I was introduced to coaching when I was doing my master's in 2011. I was introduced. The coaching faculty was doing some sort of showcase, and it was free, and I was like, oh, this sounds interesting. So I went, and I had no understanding or context or exposure to coaching before the showcase. But I saw in this showcase the coach that was facilitating it. She was a Fortune 100 coach. And she said, does anyone here have a real issue or dilemma that they want help in? So this one man raised his hand and said, I'm thinking about changing my degree. And she said, okay. And in 15 minutes, I kid you not, 15 minutes, this woman, this coach, coached this man to completely change his degree. He changed it 2 years in to his master's. He was almost done, and he would have to start all over again. But he was so impacted by this coaching that he was willing to start his master's essentially all over again, which I was just like, this is incredible. The next day, I literally went and I changed my degree to sign up for the next class. And I got to the class, super excited, did not know anything. And that's how I started my journey. That's the face that I use. Excited, but don't know what the heck to do. I started taking these classes and getting skills in coaching, but then I realized this is a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. And one of the classes was an assessment class. And so I had to get assessed by my peers. And I did so bad that they basically gave me a lot of tips a lot of feedback that was basically, you're terrible. I was so upset with myself that I was literally like, I'm done. This is stupid. I went to my professor, the head of the faculty, and I was like, you know what? I quit. I'm sorry. Um, and that was when I knew I was at D2, right? This is kind of, I'm stuck or I'm frustrated. I don't know. And I did try and quit. But then my professor sat down with me and he actually said, no, listen, you're really good. You're much better than you give yourself credit for. And he actually gave me examples in class. Um, and he broke down some of the things of why I wasn't doing that well. And he really reignited the confidence I had. So it was really interesting how he got me back. But I did tell him I wanted to quit, and he essentially talked me out of it. And that's how I got back onto D3. So I want to pause here for you all to have that story for yourself. However you got, whatever you mentioned to yourself, what are you thinking that you were D4 in? How did you start the journey? How did you push through the times when it was difficult? How did you know that you're at a place that you're actually, you're not bad? And when did you cross over into this place where you're like, yeah, no, I'm confident? And the reason why it's important for you to do that is because when you can get those 4 different dimensions along your story to where getting to D4, you'll be able to identify where someone else is at as you lead them. And the point is, can you lead them in such a way to move them from each developmental level? If you do that, that will be a positive leadership work environment, and it will come from you. And that's the goal. So I don't know if this is going to work. I don't know if we reset the chat box, but I'm going to ask you to check whether we understand this concept. So you can't annotate, I don't think, but what you can do is just drop in the chat where you are at a developmental level. Talking to a potential client about the benefits of investing rather than keeping money in the bank. So you can just type in D1, D2, D3, or D4 into the chat. I'm not sure whether I'll be able to see it or not, but D1, let me remind you, D1 is no experience whatsoever, but super motivated and super enthusiastic. D2 is no skill set, no confidence, and don't want to do it. D3 is relatively confident, relatively motivated, and D4 is super confident, ready to go, can do. There we go. D3s and D4s, some D2s here. Okay. Now this is IBF. I'm assuming that all of you have some sort of financial background or ability. So lots of D3s and D4s. Wonderful. Good. Now, thank you for that. Pause on that. What about running a half marathon in 2 months? Running a half marathon in 2 months. Now remember, D1, enthusiastic and you want to do it, you just don't know how. D2 is little to no experience and you don't want to do it at all. D3 is, yeah, I think I'd be able to do it. And D4 is half marathon, no problem. There we go. Lots of D2 people who are not really wanting to run a half marathon. I personally, as D2 here, I have run before in my life. So for example, I give this example. If you've run for a bus, you have some experience running. So really, there's no one who would be D1 at this. And I'd love to hear, so if I was doing this workshop with you, I'd have to ask you to share a little bit more. So lots of, a few runners here, not bad. Last one, cooking dinner at home for 10 people at your place on Saturday. D1, D2, D3, D4. I would say I am D3 because I have a few recipes I could do. Lots of people here, not cooks. Some D2s here, no experience, don't want to do it. Some people here at D1, which is like, are you saying that, hopefully you're saying that you are not experienced but enthusiastic? And there's some people who are a little bit confident. Oh, no one's D4. No one's thinking 10 people, no problem, can do. So this is what is important, what I want to share with you all. You can be that quick in diagnosing where you're at. It can be that quick when you're thinking about one of the people that you lead. And if you could understand, hey, on a task or goal, whether it's, they got to meet some sort of target, or they have to be able to bring in this amount of revenue or clientele, you can assess what they're at, but then talk to your person and really align on whether they are D1, D2, D3, or D4, whether they are super enthusiastic, but just don't know how to do it, whether they are stuck and discouraged and don't want to do it. Or maybe they're D3 and they're like, yeah, okay, I'm hesitant, but I feel like I can. Or maybe they're D4, super able, super confident, and they need to. Now, I'm presenting all of these to you because it's not for you to just label someone, but it's for you to have a good foundation to have a great conversation with someone. Because you can say to someone, hey, for this goal or task you got to do, I feel like you're D3. I feel like you're able to do it, but maybe you're not super confident, or maybe you're not super motivated. What do you think? And then they could go, yeah. And that could be a great conversation. That would be how I suggest you would use what you're learning today. Why? Because don't put people in boxes, don't label them, but have a great conversation. So that's what diagnosing is all about. It's not necessarily about a label, it's just understanding where someone is at in a specific task or goal. Because once you do that, you can match the type of leadership that they would need. Now, just like we did for diagnosing, there are 4 separate leadership styles, and this is the second part of the leadership framework for SL2. It is kind of down, up, down again. This is kind of bell curve, but it's starting from the bottom right, going up, down into supporting, and then ending at delegating. It's color-coded and the numbers match. The S stands for leadership style. Remember, D is the developmental level, S is the leadership style. For us here at SL2, what we teach is that there are, just like there was competence and commitment, there are 2 leadership behaviors, being directive or supportive. Think of directive being, how do you tell someone what to do? They focus on the what and the how, the skill sets, right? And then the supportive leadership style is basically asking how they're doing. It's listening. It's maybe a bit more of a soft skills, because people need both. They need both the hard skills in terms of skill set, task, and stuff, but then they also need a bit of human from you, They need someone to talk to. Some people need a lot more talking to. Some people need less, but everyone needs a little bit of support. Now, let me go over this very quickly. D1, low competence, but super motivated, high commitment, right? Think of the new hire or fresh grad. So you need to give them super high direction, but you don't need to give them support so much, like emotional support, because they're already super motivated, right? So if someone's like super motivated but doesn't know how to do the job, and you're like, oh, so tell me how you're feeling. Well, I feel great. Tell me how to do the job. And that's why we need a high directive, low supportive. And that's why S1 is called directing. So it matches, right? If someone is not skilled at a job, no experience, they need someone to tell them what to do. That's why S1 is called directing. S2 then is high directive, high supportive. Why? Because D2 is low competence and low commitment. They're stuck, they're discouraged, they don't have the skill set, they're not delivering. Well, then they need some coaching. They need high direction, tell me how to do the job, but they also need support, which looks like, hey man, tell me what's going on. You seem a bit stuck. What's happening? Now, some of you are, I know statistically, some of you will be excellent at this. Statistically, there'll also be some of you on this call who are not good at all. And I want to encourage you to consider taking SL2, because we give you a lot of resources, literally conversation starters on how to do this with SL2. With D3, they're delivering, right? They're productive, but they're not necessarily, their commitment is not super high. Either it's a confidence or it's a motivation issue. We don't know. So they need some support, right? So they need a bit of support. They need less direction. Why? Because they're already producing. They're already contributing. They're hitting targets, but maybe they're not super confident about it. And that's why we need high support. How do we get their confidence up? How do we get their motivation up? Then with D4 people, they're high competence, high commitment. So you actually need low support, low directive. You just delegate to them, check in with them, acknowledge them, go for it. So let me give you some understanding here. We got to be flexible. If we have highlighted every situation to fall into 4 quadrants of developmental levels, then there are 4 leadership styles needed. Now, we cover this a lot in SL2, but I'll just say this briefly, that most people, before they do SL2, can only do 1 leadership style. My way or the highway. I'm the boss. You all do how I'm supposed to do. Most people in the world have 1 style. 1/3 of leaders can do 2 styles. And I think you understand this. You would lead a fresh grad who is super motivated but has no experience in the job. You would lead them differently from someone who's been in the job for 15 years and knows it better than you. You wouldn't lead them the same. So most people understand that. But when it comes to 3 different leadership styles, that's 1 in 10. And when it comes to 4, it's 1 in 100 leaders. And this is before they do SL2 with us. Afterwards, it's very different. But this is what we have found over the last 20 years. Flexibility is crucial, because if you want to diagnose where someone is at in a task or goal, the goal is that you match what they need. So when it comes to direction or support, think of it like this. You see this young man here on the left, he's drilling something in. You don't let someone handle something like this on their own. Why? Because they need direction. They need to be trained. They need to be shown how to do it. In some cases like this, if he's not shown and just given it to him, he could hurt himself or hurt others. So for people like who are at D1 at something, they're enthusiastic, but they have no experience. So they need to be shown how to do this. Supporting, though, over time, you shift a little bit. Supporting is just, hey, he's checking in with them. He's allowing this young man now to do it on himself, and he's just doing a supporting function. Different situations require different types of leadership. In some situations, it's technical and it could actually hurt something, but in some cases, it's mission critical and a mistake could lead to real serious repercussions. Different situations require different types of leaderships. When it comes to directive behaviors, and this is just a reference for you, when you really need to direct someone, it's not always bad. Some people think micromanagement is bad, but when somebody really doesn't know what to do, micromanagement could be the best thing. But I understand micromanagement is a bad word. Directive behaviors is setting smart goals, showing and telling how. The top 2 are the most impactful. When it comes to supportive leadership, listening is the most important. So if you forget everything today, just think if someone needs support, you got to listen. Or if someone needs direction, set better goals and show them how to do it. Now remember, this is all about setting a positive leadership work environment, positive leadership culture. And the way that you can do that is to know what your people need and then give them what they need in terms of leadership. So we're going to round this off and then we're going to have some Q&A time. But this is a cheat sheet on how to actually apply this even at the end of this call immediately. If you're in an S1 style, meaning that the person in front of you that you're talking to is at D1 for a specific goal or task, meaning that they have no skill, no competence, but super high commitment. They need some direction. So the nature of the conversation is going to be, hey, I'm going to tell you what you need. I don't need to be supportive. I just need to give you direction. Let me tell you, I'll decide what you need to do. Why do they need that type of leadership? Because they don't know, and that's okay. For S2 style, for the coaching style, not executive coaching like what I do, but again, a coaching to help someone move along. You want to get them unstuck because at D2, remember, they're stuck, they want to quit, they're discouraged, they have low competence and low commitment, right? So you need to combat that with some high direction and high support. So if you find someone who's in that stuck place, the conversation should be, hey, let's talk. That's the high supportive. Hey, what's going on? How come you're stuck? Tell me about what's happening. And because they need direction, then it's, I'll decide. So it's like, let's talk, let me find out what's going on. But in the end, you still need to get them unstuck. They don't know how to get themselves unstuck. So you move them forward and you tell them, hey, I'm going to tell you how to get unstuck. For someone at S3, remember, D3 is they're contributing, right? Their competence is pretty high, but their commitment is variable. So you got to find out, is this a motivation thing or is this a confidence thing? So what you want to do is you need to be highly supportive, less directive. And that looks like the conversation would be, hey, let's talk. What's going on here? Is this a motivation thing or is this a confidence thing? And then you say, hey, you are delivering, you're doing well. What do you think you should do? Then they decide, and then they build their confidence. And then by continually doing that, they'll get their confidence to a point where they get to be delegated to. And then the conversation is, hey, you're excellent. You decide. So this is a cheat sheet that I give all the people that do SL2. Why? Because you can't remember a lot of things going into every conversation. But if you can just have this concept when you're sitting with your team members, oh, they need some direction. Okay, I'll decide what they need to do. Or, oh, they sound stuck or discouraged. Let's talk about it. And then I need to tell them how to get unstuck. So it's a really simple way for you to match what's needed to the person in front of you. Put them all together, and now you have the overview of the SL2 model. Now, this is just an overview, and I've given you a whole bunch of content and a whole bunch of stuff, but this is a masterclass, so I'm assuming you all kept up and took screenshots. And I don't know if we're going to give you the slide deck later, but this is all to say, in order to really have a positive leadership culture, you really have to have good conversations with your team members. Some of you think you know what they want, and some of you need to have that conversation because sometimes your thinking is not right. Some of you need to have the conversation because you just simply don't know what your people need. And when you can get that, if you can create a psychologically safe environment where people can talk to you honestly, then you can have some really good conversations about what they need. And then if you can meet their need with the leadership style that's appropriate, you're going to not only see a positive work leadership coming from you, but you're going to hopefully see some business outcomes that will increase over time. One of the things that we like to ask here, and essential to Ken Blanchard in all of his leadership concepts, is, am I here to be served or am I here to serve? If you have a concept that if you serve your team and help them, they are going to not only help you, but they're going to be happy workers. And that might be a new thing for some of you. But I encourage, you don't have to like, kill yourself for those people. It's not like that what I'm talking about. But all I'm saying is, if you have a little bit of a them focus, how to really meet their needs, then you will really create a positive leadership style. So if any of this was something that you want to dive into further, the difference between what I just shared with you and what you'll do in an actual SL2 course is that there's a lot more depth to it, and especially in terms of practicing how to have those conversations well. We also give you a ton of resources in order to use and apply the concepts immediately. So we have SL2 workshops coming up in November and December. Now, again, I want to reiterate, if you have a demand in your organization for an SL2 and you want to take advantage of the last IBF fundings for the year, please contact us immediately and we could try and make that happen in your organization. But again, these are public programs, so that's coming up soon. Okay, so I think I'm going to end there, and I have time for questions. I'll answer any questions on SL2, anything that you would want coaching on and leadership that I can talk to, anything at all in terms of leadership or setting a positive leadership culture in your organization or in your team. So we have some time, so drop it in the chat and I'll address them as we go. So please drop it in the Q&A and then we'll see what happens. And I would love to have some interaction here just so that I can help really hammer this stuff home or help any of you in your leadership. So let's have a few questions. So there are individual, so I'll answer this. There are individual SL2 classes, which is our public program. You can find them, you can find it on leadershiptraining.com .sg. And maybe Denise, you can type in there what the website is. Very good question. Should we have 4 leadership patterns? The simple answer is yes. We believe that different situations require different types of leadership. Now, what we have found is most people have at least 1, maybe 2 leadership styles that they use the most. But by being aware that you have 4 different situations, at least, it will make you a much better leader. So there are many things that you can respond in any situation. However, we do think that if you really want to be an effective, impactful leader, you should understand and access these 4 different leadership styles. It's a suggestion, but it's something that we know that works. So please go ahead and drop some more questions in. I will say this, the best leaders, it's not like they all of a sudden pretend that they're someone they're not. It's just very gently shifting themselves to realize, I need to be a bit more listening to their issues rather than just telling them what to do. Or I need to back off and give them authority and give them space. So it's really that tiny, but for some people who take SL2 with us or take these programs, it's kind of a life changer for them. We have some dates for SL2, so you can go on the website. I think so. If not, we will come out with that very soon. Very good question. What leadership style works for a defensive employee who thinks the world is against them? So when somebody thinks like that, generally that's a defensive, closed stance. And if you see me, I'm doing this. Everyone's out to get me, or maybe coworkers don't like me, or bosses aren't giving me the resources I need or the authority I need. So that generally is a bit of a D2 attitude when they're stuck and they think everyone. Now, if they don't want to talk to you, that's another thing. So that's more of a coaching conversation that I'll have with you. But you want to start with the supportive questions. Hey, what's going on? And then when you really find out the reasons for their defensiveness, giving them solutions on how to get undefensive, or combating their concept of what reality is. Because in their world, their reality is everyone's out to get me, right? If you could present some facts that show that not everyone is out to get them, and then give them tangible solutions to move forward with success, then that helps break down their reality, which is not right, that they're defensive and the whole world is out to get them. When somebody has this concept of everyone's out to get me, it means they think it's true. It's true to them. But if you can present the reality of it not being true, and then give them tips and ways forward, it will help combat that thought. Okay. Could you give some perspective about using SL2? I love this question. While dealing with real business constraints in guiding my subordinate. So real business constraints, I'm not going to ask for clarification here, but sometimes it is hard to sit down and want to have a conversation like this with your subordinates when either you have your own targets that you need to hit, or there's really not much you can do in terms of being able to change the scope or the situation around. In those situations, really the intent is very important. This is what we talk to leaders. If you sit down with someone and express the situation, many times, and I've seen this happen before, Freddie, where the subordinate didn't appreciate the struggles that the leader had. So the leader actually explained, look, here is all the things that I have to deal with in terms of my own deliverables. Here's the stresses that I have from these stakeholders, the situation, and here's why I really struggle to actually execute the things that you want to do. I want you to understand where I'm coming from. And that, Freddie, sometimes has helped leaders connect with their people, because the people then go, oh my gosh, I didn't know that you were dealing with so much. Thank you. And then they give you a bit more compassion. And hopefully it will let them understand that there are some things you just can't deliver as a leader. But it's the expectation of you delivering it, if you can have that clear communication, that will really help. At least that's how I see it. Will there be a different leadership style for the big boss versus each leader? So we have this problem where someone has done SL2 and they have all these concepts and someone hasn't done SL2. But we do this thing in SL2 when you do the actual workshop, how to manage up. How do you use the SL2 concepts with a boss that doesn't know anything about SL2 and doesn't really understand anything? Well, we give you some tools, we give you some PDF resources that actually tells your boss, you tell your boss what you need from your boss. You don't teach them SL2 language, you don't teach them the concept. You just basically highlight, boss, I need you to be more supportive. Boss, I need you to encourage me. Boss, I need more resources. And it's really interesting when people use this resource that we give people on the SL2 workshop, because it basically gives them a tool to say, can you please lead me differently? Now, full disclosure, some bosses ignore it and they hate it. Some bosses go, wow, I didn't know that you need this. And it comes across very positively. I'm not saying it does every time, but I'm saying that for some people, having this PDF resource to say, boss, I need you to do this for me more, really helps their working relationship. Oh, okay, let's talk about this, burnout. They're performing, but management could not provide, oh, this is so shifty, could not provide resources to help them and people are leaving. In your organization, wherever this is coming from, I can't really speak to the specifics there. But the D2 conversation, which is a coaching conversation, which is a high support conversation, which is the, hey, what's going on? Let's talk. That should help people before they get to actual burnout and leave. Okay. Some bosses that I've experienced are just like, you have your goals, you know what you need to do, just don't talk to me until you've completed your tasks or hit your targets. Obviously, that's one way of leading, but it may not be the best way. If people are trying to perform and they really cannot perform, and everything you do to help them to perform and they can't, perhaps this is not the right team, perhaps this is not the right profession. Maybe leaving is the best option. And I'm not one to say everyone has to stay in their job, because that's not realistic. That's not true. But if management cannot provide the resources, have you explained that they cannot? And are you able to have that genuine conversation? But if you are setting people up to fail, now I'm saying this, I'm assuming this, yeah? If you goal someone to do something and management or the organization is not resourcing the people to do it, then the goal is wrong. Then you're setting people to fail. That's why we go back and change the goal to make it something that's attainable. Okay? To me, that's an attainable issue, and that goal should never have been set if you're not going to resource your people to achieve what they need to achieve. And if you keep having, I've seen situations where the goals are not set by the manager, the goals set by the team leader, the bigger leader or the organization, and they say, well, tough, you have to deal with it. Then, I would suggest pushing back to this concept, because if you set someone a goal and you don't give them the adequate resources to achieve their goal, then the goal setting itself is wrong, or management has to change their resourcing strategy. That's my opinion without knowing the details. Oh, yes, this is a great question. How do we go about supporting someone who thinks they're D4, but he's actually not at D4? Or if they're D2 and they think they should, or basically, what if they have no self-awareness? So we go over this in the SL2 workshop, but what you do is, if they think they're at a different place, right? Then you go back and you say, great, you tell me, where is the proof? You show me your proof and your understanding of why you're at this developmental level, right? So they wouldn't necessarily be at D2, because D2, they would feel stuck and feel discouraged. So what we have sometimes is, people is they think they're really, really great, but they're actually not, right? So then they don't necessarily be two, but they'd be more D3. So when they say, when you go to this person, show me the proof. Show me, why do you think, what's your evidence that you're at this level? Then they go, well, I've done A, B, and C. And you go, well, A, B, and C, if it's clearly not up to par, then you say, no, the A, B, C is not good enough. If they did A, B, and C, but they did it in a poor way, you have to show proof. If you go down this path of show me, then you have to show them exactly why they're not. When they have this conversation, and I've coached people in this coached managers in this conversation, you better have your evidence clear as day, and you better be able to explain to this person, because either they don't know the evidence, they haven't seen it, or they genuinely think that they are so good at their job. You have to explain it in a way that they see from your perspective why it's not perfect. What happens that we teach in the SL2 workshop is, if you continue having this discrepancy, you then go and say, are we sure we're talking about the same goal? You make sure you reaffirm the goal. And if they continue to do it, say, okay, I'm going to, let's say if your situation, if you think you're at a D4 and you think that they're not, you give them a goal according to what a D4 is, but you make it very specific. And if they achieve the goal, then the problem isn't the person. The problem is your ability to appraise whether they're at the right, because you may get it wrong. They may actually be at D4. Because if you can say to them, okay, if you think you're D4, then go here. Here's a goal. Go show me that you're D4. And if then they go achieve it, then they are at D4. And that might be you just don't like them, which is definitely a thing that I've seen before too. Okay, this is more of a coaching conversation, and I'm going to tackle this because this sounds fun. How do you deal with difficult team members who try to shift their responsibility and do less work, not cooperative with other team members, leading to imbalance of work with other team members? So I'm going to answer this in the frame of a positive leadership culture, okay? Because that's the whole point of this webinar. Lauren, I would suggest to you a feedback framework called SBIR. You can look it up. It's situation, behavior, impact, response. CCL, Center for Creative Leadership, came up with SBI. I added the R. So dealing with difficult team members who have to shift their responsibility and do less work. Do you have evidence? Not cooperating with other team members could be subjective. Do you have email threads or proof that they're not compatible? So what you do is you bring up the situation. This is a feedback model. Last Tuesday in the meeting, you were very difficult because I observed you. It has to be firsthand if possible. Don't do the hearsay firsthand. I observed you to be cutting people off during the meeting, speaking in a really negative tone, and that's the behavior. You cut people off, you spoke in a negative tone, and then the impact it had on me and the others in the room. It seemed like to me that that was really derailing the meeting, and it was very difficult. Now the R is, what's your response? Wait for them to talk. And if they say, I disagree with you, then they have no awareness, right? Then you need to deal with awareness. If they say, I don't care, then it's an attitude problem, right? If they say, I think you're being too sensitive, right? Then it's about, well, if this is a subjective thing, then you have to say as a leader, it's not subjective. I gave you the situation. This is your behavior, which is not acceptable because it's having this negative impact. See how you stick to that SBIR? And you need to then very quickly get them to understand the situation and then commit to change. Either they commit or you tell them, this is the kind of behavior I do not want to see anymore in meetings. When you give that kind of feedback and have that conversation, you need to couple it with what is the behavior change. Okay, so this is way off topic from SL2, but I'm helping you build a positive leadership culture. Bring the situation, bring the observed behavior, not I heard someone say, or Sally told me this. It's I saw you do this, or I saw in the email chain. Here's the proof. This is the behavior and this is the impact that it's having, and I need you to understand it and I need you to change. Get them to identify what it is and then articulate the change for the impact that you want to have. Make sure there's written response afterwards. Get them to write it if possible, so that there's an email chain. And if you can, set a time limit on it. So whoever this person is, you go to them and say, hey, I really want to see a change, the behavior and the impact change, and I need to see it within the next 3 months. Or by the next meeting, I need to see immediate change. Get agreement, get them to say yes or no, get it on an email so there's an email chain so that everything's clear as day. Okay, this is a good question here, Monica. If the coworker dare not make the decision, how do you encourage them? How do you encourage someone? So this is a confidence kind of thing. As a coworker, you want to give evidence and proof, Monica, to your friend, to your coworker. If they're very concerned, you want to show them that they've made this decision in the past and show them that they made good decisions before, or show them other people who have made this decision. But what you want to do is you want to speak confidence into them. And you also want to find out what's stopping them. What's the fear of their decision? Why are they not choosing to do it? So if you can do some of that and showing evidence to the person, it usually helps people make better. This is a long question. I love long questions. So I'm going to try this, Wendy. I have a first team dinner coming up. It's a new team member assembled last year, new department, new business. So everything's new. First team speech, how to motivate them to see the direction and work towards the challenges. Okay, so you're going to do a group thing, group dinner. You're going to give a big speech. First of all, think about the impact and the outcome you want to have, right? Don't do any points just yet. And this is a tip for anyone who does public speaking in any situation, whether it's a team meeting or whether you're standing up in front of people, giving a speech, whatever. Think about what impact do you want to have, and think about the specific outcome. When you have a specific outcome in your mind, work backwards. What can I say that's going to get to this outcome? Okay. Start first with the outcome and the impact that you want to have. Bookend it, meaning tell them this is the impact I want to have. This is I'm assuming that you want a potential framework. So when do you get up there and say, hello, everyone, the purpose of me talking and the purpose of tonight is to align, and this is what I want the outcome to be. So you start with that, and then you go into whatever points, whatever technical things, whatever else you need to say. And then at the end you say, and this is why I want to have this impact. So you ram it home at the beginning, at the end, you bookend it. Don't start with your points. Your points are there to serve a purpose. What is the purpose of what do you want to achieve? Okay. Now, your individuals are all over the place. There's going to be new challenges, but also think about, Wendy, what do you want your people to think and feel about you after you have spoken to your team? Do you want to express confidence? Do you want to express openness to talk with them? Do you want to express strong leadership? Make like one or two, and this is what I do when I coach people for public speaking, is make 1 or 2 points on how you want to come across. So it's a little bit of strategy here to think, okay, what's the impact of this whole thing that you're doing, and how do you want to come across? It's a new team, and it's your first time you're doing this. So have a think about, be intentional about what you want to achieve, both in terms of outcome in the meeting and what you want to achieve in terms of communicating your leadership. Oh, this is super fun. I'm going to answer maybe a couple more and then we're going to stop. I need to let you all go. Why is D3 not motivated? Why is D3 not confident or motivated when they are pretty good at their work? So what we want to do is we want to get people to D4. Why? Because when people are at D4, they are fully on their own and they're really motivated and they're super achievers. So the majority of people in work are at D3. Let's be honest. They're not like super motivated and super amazing at everything, or they're super confident. Most people are at D3. However, there are certain roles and functions that people need to be D4 at. So not every single thing you do at work, and let's be honest, in all the things that we do at work, we're not like super amazing at every single thing. But there are some things that are mission critical to our function. And so really for those D3 things that need to be D4, a lot of times, if they're pretty good, but they need to be excellent, then we have to find out what's stopping them from being excellent. Now, not every function or every team member is going to be D4 at everything, right? But there are some things that a worker under you is going to have to be D4 at. And if they're currently at D3, let's get them to D4. And usually the conversation is this a confidence thing or is this a motivation thing? Okay, how do you overcome discriminating and double standard leadership? So let me speak both ways, and this will be the last question. If you have a leader above you who is discriminating and has double standards, how I coach people in this situation is to make sure, one, that you do your job well. Okay. The reason why is because bosses who are discriminating have double standards. You need to, at any point in time, be able to defend how good you are at your job. Because if the boss has double standards or discriminates, you need to have evidence very readily available. Not in a like, here, look at this, but just these are my numbers. When you have a good track record, because challenging leadership when you don't have a good track record, when you don't have good numbers, is going to be very difficult. But if you are executing at a high level and you have proof at any point in time, when you address the discrimination or the double standards in leadership, you have integrity in this area. People will listen to you because you do well. And honestly, some people think that they should be heard anyway, but if you're not good at your job, people won't listen to you, especially a leader above you. Double standards in leadership is very hard to address in a leader because you are below them. Discriminating, though, is to make sure you highlight everything, have everything on record to ensure that when this boss who says, can you do this? You clarify, oh, what does this mean? What does it look like to do a good job? And you really, really, really clarify those things so that, and you get it on paper so that when you achieve these things, it's all clearly laid out. What a lot of people don't do is they don't have email threads and they don't have an actual recap of what was said. A lot of it is he said, she said. So leaders that have very loose email threads records about what they do for task or what they're discriminating people against, you need to nail them down and commit, or at least have some sort of record on that. Double standards in leadership, I'm sorry to say, is very difficult to deal with because if someone is in a higher level than you, how do you overcome that? Most of the time, I would say you have to ensure that you are doing your job, and when it is appropriate, to call it out. Now, I say this hugely, hugely, hugely sensitively because it really depends on your environment and all of things. But the way that I have dealt with double standards in both my coaching and in my personal work experience is that I lead myself in a way that really, and do my work in a way that screams a lot louder than my boss. Because at the end of the day, I want to be able to look in the mirror and say, you know what, my boss can do all this stuff, but I am shining a different example. At some point, if you don't address this, you will take on the burden of everything. And sometimes it is about leaving that situation if that person is not open to it. But directly addressing double standard leadership is very, very sensitive. I do not suggest you go above the level. We never, ever as coaches suggest and coach people to go above, to skip level, especially if you do not have a relationship with that person. It usually never turns out well. But you have to set an example first. You have to have integrity as a productive worker there, as a leader there first. When the time is right, there is a reflection to the leader. And if that doesn't go well, then honestly, and I've done this many times as I've coached that person out of the role. Okay. But the reason why I say you have to handle your stuff first is because if you do not have your own integrity and your own abilities to say, I know what I'm doing, I know what good leadership looks like, look at me, everyone will be like, you're not even doing your job. Who are you to think that you could say this to a leader? So make sure you are in a place where your productivity and your deliverables are done well enough that when you stand up and say, hey, this isn't right, people aren't like judging you because you're not a good worker. You have to set a different culture in and of yourself, and then your voice will be a lot more powerful. Okay, sorry, I'm going to end there. So I really enjoyed that, but I am going to stop here. Please, this is my contact. You can email me if you want. You can reach out and talk to me about any of the stuff that we talked today. Would love to hear from you, but we are at time and I want to hand it back over to Nicole.
All right, thank you very much, Derek. Thank you very much, Momenta. That's all we have for today. If you'd like to stay connected with IBF, you can join our Telegram group or you can sign up for our mailing list for future events such as these. We'll see you again soon. Take care. Bye.